The day had been long and the road endless. The hotel, an old Victorian building, loomed in the darkness. Its Gothic architecture, swallowed by the night, appeared more haunting than welcoming. As I stepped inside, the air turned colder, a stark contrast to the warmth of the summer night outside. The dimly lit lobby, with its antique furniture and faded wallpaper, seemed frozen in time. The receptionist, an older man with a haggard face and hollow eyes, greeted me with an unsettling smile. His voice, a raspy whisper, echoed through the silent lobby as he asked for my details. Each word he spoke was drawn out, as if he was savoring them. His eyes never left mine, making the whole interaction feel incredibly unnerving. The receptionist, with a strange grin, handed me an old brass key and muttered, "Room 13, top floor, don't mind the noises." His eerie chuckle echoed in my ears long after I had left the lobby. The winding staircase creaked under my weight as I climbed to the top floor. Room 13, my temporary abode, awaited me, an island of silence in the otherwise bustling hotel. The door groaned in protest as I pushed it open, revealing an interior as cold as a winter's morn. Unpacking became a ritual of sorts, a methodical dance of placing my belongings in their new, temporary homes. Yet, with each garment unfurled and each toiletry placed, the silence seemed to deepen, to expand, consuming the room like a gluttonous beast. A chill ran down my spine as if cold fingers were tracing an icy path. The room, though void of life, felt heavy, like 1,000 unseen eyes were fixed on me. A sense of unease began to pervade my thoughts, worming its way into the crevices of my mind. As I unpacked, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. The silence of the room was broken by a soft, rhythmic tapping. A sound, so subtle yet so distinct, that it seemed to echo in the eerie quiet of the room. I paused, straining to locate the source. It was coming from the wardrobe, an old, imposing piece of furniture that stood in the corner, its wood darkened by age. I approached the wardrobe, the tapping growing louder with each step. It was a constant rhythm, like someone or something was trying to communicate. I reached out, my hand resting on the cool, polished surface of the door. The tapping ceased. A silence so profound followed that I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I opened the wardrobe, my curiosity outweighing the irrational fear that had begun to creep into my mind. Inside, it was filled with old coats, their fabric worn and faded. They hung there, silent and lifeless, a stark contrast to the sound that had filled the room just moments ago. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing to make sense of it all. Maybe it was just the old pipes, I thought, or perhaps the wind rustling against the window pane. But deep down, I knew it was neither of these. The tapping had been too rhythmic, too purposeful. I closed the wardrobe, the creaking hinges echoing in the room. The tapping resumed, this time softer, as if whatever was making the noise had been satisfied by my acknowledgement. A shiver ran down my spine, but I forced a laugh, trying to dismiss the unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. I walked away from the wardrobe, the tapping fading into the background as I tried to ignore it. I told myself that it was just the old building settling, that there was a rational explanation for everything. But as I lay in bed that night, the soft tapping echoing in the silence, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. I laughed it off, attributing the noise to the old building's creaking structure. But deep down, I knew that the uninvited guest in my room was not as easily explained. As night fell, the silence of the room grew louder. An eerie quietude settled in, wrapping the room in a blanket of stillness that was almost palpable. The ticking of the clock on the wall, the only sound in this tomb-like tranquility, seemed to echo unnaturally, each tick a chilling reminder of my isolation. I found myself in the grip of an uneasy restlessness, the day's unsettling events replaying in my mind like a broken record. I tried to sleep, desperately seeking the sanctuary of dreams, but sleep was a reluctant visitor that night. The bed, usually a safe haven, felt unfamiliar, even hostile. Then the tapping returned. It was a soft, rhythmic sound, like skeletal fingers drumming on wood. This time it seemed to come from under the bed. The sound was persistent, insistent, like a whispered secret trying to make itself heard. The rhythm was hypnotic, luring me into a state of heightened anxiety. The room grew colder, as though an invisible chill had seeped in. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and a shiver ran down my spine, snaking its way into my very bones. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, a futile attempt to ward off the icy tendrils of fear that were slowly creeping in. A sense of dread started to take hold, a gnawing fear that was more than just a product of my overactive imagination. The room felt different, as if it was aware of my discomfort and was feeding off it. The walls seemed to close in on me, the ceiling seemed to descend, and the floor seemed to shift beneath me. I was trapped in a living nightmare. My heart pounded in my chest like a frantic drum, echoing the rhythm of the tapping. I strained my ears, trying to decipher the message in the sounds. The silence was no longer comforting, it was menacing, an accomplice to the unseen terror. I was sure now, I wasn't alone in the room. Each tap under the bed was a chilling confirmation of my fears, each tick of the clock a countdown to an unknown horror. With the break of dawn, I decided to confront my fear. No more hiding, no more running. I was not going to let the shadows of the night rule my day, so I mustered up the courage to check under the bed. I half expected to see a pair of glowing eyes staring back at me, but instead, I found something entirely unexpected. An old, worn-out diary. The diary had a soft leather cover, aged by time and yellowed pages that crinkled under my touch. It was a silent witness to countless untold stories, secrets, and fears. As I flipped through it, I noticed it belonged to a previous occupant of room 13. The entries were sporadic, but they all spoke of strange happenings in the room, much like what I had experienced. The occupant, too, had felt an eerie presence, heard unexplained noises, and had sleepless nights. Every word I read echoed my own fears and experiences. The diary entries were like a mirror to my own terror, amplifying it but also making me feel less alone. The writer had felt what I felt, heard what I heard, and feared what I feared. And just like me, they had tried to rationalize it, tried to convince themselves it was all a figment of their imagination, a result of stress or fatigue. But as the entries progressed, the tone changed from skepticism to fear, and then to outright terror. The occupant began to acknowledge the presence, no longer able to deny the uncanny occurrences. The entries became more frantic, the handwriting more erratic, the fear palpable on every page, and then, suddenly, the entries stopped, abruptly, without any farewell or conclusion. The last entry, dated exactly 1 year ago, read, "I can't ignore it anymore. Something is here with me." The words hung in the air, chilling me to the bone. I was left with the diary, the silence of the room, and an overwhelming sense of dread. What had happened to the previous occupant? What was in this room with us? And most importantly, what was going to happen to me? The realization hit me like a cold wave. Room 13 was haunted. A chill ran down my spine, a cold and eerie sensation that seemed to echo the whispers of the past. I had every reason to pack my bags and bolt, to leave behind the chilling mysteries of room 13. But there was something that held me back. This was more than just a haunting. It was an unfinished story, a tale left untold, waiting to be heard. The diary, aged and weather-beaten, whispered secrets from the past. It spoke of a presence, an entity, a ghost that shared my temporary residence. The previous entries, urgent and desperate, painted a vivid picture of a spectral tenant, trapped within the confines of room 13. In the hushed silence of the room, I could almost hear the echoes of the diary's author, pleading for understanding, begging for release. The entries ended abruptly, a story left hanging in mid-air, a melody with no closure. It was a narrative begging to be completed, a tale craving to be understood. As the sun dipped beyond the horizon, painting the sky in hues of deep orange and crimson, I found myself torn between fear and intrigue. The thought of spending another night in a haunted room was terrifying, but the allure of the diary's unfinished story was too strong to resist. I decided to stay. I decided to confront the spectral entity that had been the source of so much fear and curiosity. I decided to try and understand, to bring closure to the unfinished story that had been left behind in the pages of the diary. As the last ray of sunlight disappeared, plunging room 13 into darkness, I felt a strange sense of anticipation. I wasn't just a guest in this room anymore. I was a part of its story, a character in its narrative. The night whispered its secrets through the rustling curtains, and the room seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. I sat there, the diary in my hand, my heart pounding in my chest. As night fell again, I waited, the diary in my hand, ready to face what lurked in room 13.